So, hey guys, and welcome to this week's episode of the podcast. The Because I Can podcast, of course. We're going to do something a little bit different this week. We, as some of you sort of well know, have been flat out trying to work with the schools, and we're pretty passionate about inspiring kids. And in fact, talking to some of my co-directors, Paul obviously is on the line with us here. I understand that we no longer celebrate birthdays or Christmases. Apparently what we now celebrate is the 8th of March, which I'm reliably informed is the date that all the children went back to school and parents could comfortably drink during the day again without fear of being judged. So it seemed only appropriate that this week we would talk about, because I can, Paul and I have often talked about skills we've pulled out of mountaineering, soldiering, etc., and whether they've been or whether they're valuable in kind of business. But actually, we're interested to know, are they valuable in education as well? And is there lessons we can pull into the schooling system? So we've been joined this week by Phil Miller. Phil is the Director of Sport at King Edward's in Witley. And Phil was a party in one of our schools programmes that we did the other week, although we were slightly concerned, if I'm honest, because we brought him on thinking that he was Director of Sport, but apparently likes to play golf. We're not entirely sure whether golf is actually a sport or a pastime. I think we think it's a pastime, really, and actually maybe the future of our children is in jeopardy if golf is now being cast as a sport. I don't know. Perhaps that's a bit too controversial. Phil, welcome along. Nice to have you here.
Yeah, thank you. Pleasure to be here. Thank you. I know I've spoken to you before about how difficult it is to break 80, and that's your next challenge on the golf course. I don't think you're going to get there.
What, the golf course or 80?
Either, by the sounds of it, you won't get 80.
Paul, you ever played golf?
What do they say? A great walk ruined. I've tried. It's awful. All it is just me getting angrier and angrier and angrier, and then just shouting, and then just going, this is whatever. So no, I'm not a golfer.
So, guys, we had a really interesting conversation with Phil. So, Phil responded. Ironically, you talk about networking. One of Phil's friends is a guy called Guy Schooley, who is a schoolmaster in Abu Dhabi, of all places. And we did some of the work for them in Abu Dhabi, and those two kind of linked up, and it came back around the circle. And one of the things that was really interesting for us is, this whole Because I Can thing and the kind of finding a way forward, how relevant is that into schools? And in fact, Phil reached out to us a little bit because Phil had said, Director of Sport, only we kind of can't do any sport at the moment. So what do we do to take it forward, and how do we unlock it all? So, Phil, from your perspective, I find that quite interesting. I mean, your job over the last 12 months or so, I can literally only imagine. I've been listening to Paul trying to do geography for the last 9 months, right? Which is, it's probably a good thing that we're leaving Europe and becoming an island again, because frankly, that's about the extent of the geography that's been taught probably the last 12 months. But from your point of view, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's obviously been a really difficult year, and we really feel for the pupils. And the reason I reached out to you, or put sort of a message out there on LinkedIn looking for some help, was that we've got a huge raft of pupils now, a huge raft of kids coming through the system who they don't know who they are, they don't know where they're going, what they're trying to achieve, and the reason I was obviously reaching out to you and putting that message out there was that pupils need to find some sort of direction in terms of where they're going in life, and it's been completely pulled from under their feet, and there's not a teacher across the land who doesn't desperately feel for the pupils, and just trying to put something back in their minds that they are actually in control. The message that I give to certainly my form group who are fifth form, year 11, got their GCSEs this year, is you can only control what you can control, and the best thing that they can do is work hard for their teachers, and everything else will take care of itself. Whatever you can't control, try not to worry about it. It's easier said than done. But we do have this raft up and down the country. I see it and speak to obviously many educators, and the poor kids, they're really concerned. They're really worried. The mental well-being of the pupils is below the floor. And what was great about you guys when you came in and spoke to them is the enthusiasm that suddenly then emanated back from them. We've had messages from pupils who are now doing Because I Can initiatives, such as next week, an 11-year-old girl is running a fundraiser, and everybody's got to complete anything from 3K up to 10K run during their game sessions, donate money, it all goes to charity, Comic Relief. That's her mountain, for want of for the week. We've got other pupils who are literally climbing a mountain. We've got a third form boy who is climbing his stairs every day and tracking it by spreadsheet until he's climbed to the top of Mount Everest.
Yeah, presumably he's going to be an accountant of some description. I can't use spreadsheets now, let alone for a school project.
Yeah, so I think the long and short of it is, mental well-being is talked about a lot, and it needs to be taken seriously and acted upon. And educators up and down the country are looking left, right, centre, everywhere, anywhere to get anything to just help these pupils get back on their feet. And that's what the Because I Can initiative is aimed at, and it's already had an impact already with our pupils at school. It's been great.
What I think is interesting, fellas, what you think of it, what you think is really interesting for me anyway. Sorry, Paul, come back in a sec. It is this whole thing about reassurance and direction, because that's exactly what Paul and I teach into senior leadership in businesses. Is that when people are under pressure, it's that direction that gives them a sense of purpose and helps them become part of the solution. Even if the pathway that we're going to follow isn't the direct one, but actually it is that reassurance and providing of that direction. I think that's just so important in any high pressure situation, not just at school, but actually across it. So suddenly we start to see a theme that runs through, education and business. Sorry, Paul, got to cut across there.
No, I'm just going to say that, and I see it. I used to teach at vet schools, and I've seen a lot of vets come into the profession. And some of the stuff that we talk about in the vet profession is around perfectionism and the fact that when they finally qualify as vets, their entire academic career has been one long, fantastic, brilliant success. They, grade 8 cellist, Gold Duke of Edinburgh, lots of A levels, everything's been fantastic. And then they get out there and become vets, and animals die, things go wrong, the real world happens, and failure happens. And often, for Tim and I, we're pretty good at failure now, because we've had an awful lot of experience at failing and going, oh god. And the 57th time you fail, you're like, yeah, I can cope with this. And it just reminded me, Phil, you were speaking just then about, I don't know if can you remember David Campese, the Australian
winner, yeah.
Yeah, the Australian winger. He said Australia lost, and they were really, and he was a really bad loser, and he stropped off, and he made a massive deal about it. And they interviewed him afterwards, and he went, "Look, I'm Australian. We're not very good losers. We've not had very much practice at it." And I just thought that was really good. And maybe I feel a bit for the youngsters who've got a plan and they're hitting all their targets, and then this year their plan's just been ripped up and thrown out, and I don't know what you think about that, Phil. When you first fail, it's horrible.
Yeah, absolutely. And we talk a lot, and before before COVID arrived, we talked a lot in schools about resilience. And to many pupils, it was just a word that you get taught. And yes, we've got to be resilient, and something happens, and I will be resilient. They've now all been given a crash course in resilience, and they need to know that the path to success is not success after success after success. It's usually 3 fails followed by 1 massive success followed by 3 massive fall down again. That's what the real world is, and they've not been exposed to it on a mass scale like this ever before. And my wife's a big fan of listening to Desert Island Discs, and I often just sort of pop in and listen to them. And there's one key theme whenever I listen to these enormously successful people. Wherever they've been, whatever they've achieved, is they've always hit something that is extraordinarily catastrophic, whether that's from their privileges or lack of from birth, or whether something has happened to them and throughout the course of their life. Everybody who has been successful has been hit by something that they've needed to be resilient from. And trying to get the message to the pupils, change their mindset that what is happening to you now is not horrible. It's obviously awful, but you can turn it into something that makes you even more successful in the future, because just by being resilient. And that's what resilience is. They're now seeing it in real terms, rather than just a word that we teach them. And yes, I have resilience because I've learned what it means. Now you've experienced it. Let's see if you can.
No, Phil's a brilliant point. We Paul and I bang on all day about the fact that resilience is an outcome. It's not a course or a certificate. You become resilient, and there's 2 key areas for me to do with resilience, and we talk about quite a lot. I mean, the first one is to keep going. Is that ability just to keep putting one foot in front of the other and don't give up. But the other is actually to pick yourself up after you've failed. And for me, that's quite challenging. Psychologically, that's harder because your perception is that you've failed, or that you can't see a path forward. And you mentioned earlier about direction, and I think that's super important, because I was chatting with one of your colleagues recently from another school, and she said to me, headmistress, and she said to me, look, the problem we've got, Tim, is that the current generation, in their head, they can't win. I said, what are you talking about? And they said, well, because if we give them the grades, they're the generation that got given their grades, right? If we don't give them grades, they're the generation that don't get grades. As she said, so they kind of, or we put them straight through the normal exam and the normal test, only they've missed 12 months worth of what we've seen as formal education. So now they're up against it. Pressure-wise, I think we probably all have a responsibility to relieve that pressure a little bit. I mean, we laugh, Phil, didn't we? But I've done some pretty wacky stuff. I've raced cars, helicopters, climbed mountains, worked on special duties, and done what I've done. And nobody's ever asked me for my A-level result, which, by the way, is a good thing. Paul is actually quite clever, but we talk about that all the time. That would probably be important to direction.
Yeah, and I'm surprised that school teachers even let you go anywhere near school with the it'll be okay.
Bill, you've no idea. I was laughing the other day. Guy wrote me this really nice report for what we did for the Amity school in Abu Dhabi, right? And I read it, but he wrote it like a headmaster, right? It was absolutely brilliant. And I laughed. I've actually shown it to my dad. And my dad's exact words were, well done, son, you've got to 45. And that's the first good school report I've ever seen written about you. I was like, thanks very much, Dad, yeah. Phil, out of interest, as we're going forwards now, obviously we start to unlock and we've got a kind of hybrid situation going on, I suppose. But for me, that I hadn't really thought about it, is the problem is what do you do next? Because that kind of impact is there to stay, isn't it? So what do you see as a challenge over the next 12 months? How do we help these kids realise that there is a different solution and that just because the pathway we were following isn't specific or isn't what it was, what are your thoughts? How do we get around it?
Yeah, well, you've summarised it there well. The pathway that you're going to go down is not a straight one. And even the pupils that maybe are a little bit younger and their academic grades are not going to be affected in an enormous amount by this. What they've seen is things can change. They've seen things around them within the school. It opens conversations. It opens doors for us to do things differently with the pupils as well. Again, sort of similar to having a crash course in resilience, they've also had a crash course in independence. They've been at home, and I'm talking from a PE and sports perspective. We can't deliver online lessons, to kids in their bedroom every lesson. Follow me doing lots of press ups. We have to be a little bit.
If I ever see Joe Wicks on telly again, right, there's gonna be some sort of misdemeanor con. I can literally assure you. I've now got the thought of you jumping up and down in Lycra on Zoom to Thunder and Kids. You can't see it.
No, it's fantastic. What Joe Wicks did, there's a little bit in the PE world of that's not physical education. What he did was fantastic. He got the kids up and he got them moving, and we're not expecting him to be a PE teacher in my opinion. We're trying to get the kids moving and enjoying and doing something during lockdown.
Hey, Phil, I'm in, right? Let's be part of the solution. Let's be part of the solution, not the problem, right? It's very easy to sit on the sofa and criticise. I'll never forget. Paul, do you remember the social media? Paul and I were stood at the bottom of the Matterhorn, heart racing, to be honest, at about 3 o'clock in the morning. And there's a bit of a queue before you kind of get onto the mountain to go up from the Hornley Hut. And we were stood there. We did a bit of a live, like a social media thing, saying, right, here we go. This is it, 3 in the morning, we're going up sort of thing. But I did speaking because Paul, there's this weird knocking noise. It says that's Paul's knees. But actually, you get this sort of instant troll come back again. Oh, that's not real mountaineering, is it? There's harder peaks than that. And, there's a whole queue of people there and that's not real mountaineering, which is pretty easy to say from your sofa. And I fired back to somebody and said, sorry, if what you mean is I'm standing in a line of people at 3 o'clock in the morning, all of whom are physically fit, challenging themselves, have trained for a few months to be here and utterly focused on achieving the aim, then I've stood in worse queues. I'm kind of up for it. And it's just interesting, isn't it? It's pretty easy to criticise from the sofa and do that. We always say be part of the solution.
Yeah, and it's exactly that. If people are going to pick holes in everything, especially in social media, and and that's completely separate thing of sort of educating pupils about social media. But in terms of what we've gained out of it, what the pupils have gained out of it in terms of independence has been extraordinary. That some of the feedback that we've had from the student council has been what we learned was that I can go out and I can cover this distance, and I can do it on my own, listening to a podcast, maybe because I can.
Well done, Phil, you got a job.
Plug in that. But you know, and what they've learned is that they can go out and do new things and enjoy them. We would set up, you know, what came back from the student council is having teachers tell them what to do is nothing new, but actually putting them into competitions where we had, right, you're in groups of 4 and your challenge this week is to cover X distance, and that's the equivalent of you going from London to Paris and back, and I want you to do it as a team. And then suddenly starting and going off and working together and starting to talk as a team,
absolutely brilliant,
and communicate, and all the skills that we felt were going to be enormously difficult to you know, sort of demonstrate any progress. Because they weren't in school, actually, we found different ways to do it. I think education is a wonderful sector for just, right, okay, this is what we're given, we've got to get on with it. Education sector has its, you know, obviously detractors in the public and in the media or whatever, but every time we've seen something come along that's got in our road, we're one of the sectors that really step up and like you say, be part of the solution. You throw us a hurdle, we'll figure out a way to get over it. And that's what I've seen behind the scenes up and down the country that maybe doesn't get put out into the media.
Yeah.
Of course, fantastic.
And I love that, Phil. I love the way that you're taking a negative and turning it into a positive. You know, so much is out there. It's about how awful it's been, how tough it's been, how we've, you know, everyone's taken a year backwards, we've lost a year, all the stuff that we've lost. Whereas actually, we could just as well focus, and Tim talks about it a lot as well, focus on all the stuff we've gained. You know, we don't have to spend all our time being negative. We could spend our time talking about the positive. That's awesome. You know, what have we got? We've learned independence. We've learned resilience. We've learned we can actually do it. We don't have to be told what to do. That's cool.
And actually, do you know what? If you just to bring that full circle to where we started, quite often people say to me, particularly, I mean, I said you were doing leadership training, you know, earlier on today with, you know, Gardner Aerospace, and I chatted to them, and I said, people often say, well, yeah, but you know, Sandhurst or the military, that must have given you this amazing kind of leadership grounding, and of course it does, but it actually makes you a good decision maker, which is not quite the same thing. But actually, the one thing that I've taken out of the military, lock, stock, and barrel, is a kind of solution that says we've got to fix this, right? Because we've got to get over there. That has got to happen. We've got to get out of this situation. So nobody's discussing what we haven't got, what we can't do, or maybe we should do it, because we have to. We have to work this problem and come to a conclusion. And you know what? If you guys are doing that through the schooling as well, I mean, that is, you know, that took me 20 years, 25 years to learn that lesson. And if those kids are learning that lesson now, aged whatever they are, 12, 14, whatever, plus at school, to me, that's a huge positive. Yeah. And if my kids dropped a couple of grades but came out of school with that background, I'd actually feel way more confident about them.
Yeah, I think what gets lost in education a lot is that some people think that you're in education so you can get your grades at the end of it. Of course, that's a great part of it. The ultimate goal is you're in education so that you can be a success when you leave education. You know, I've said a few times that when I asked how do you judge the success of your sports program, it's how many pupils or former pupils are still taking part in sport when they leave school. They've succeeded. They're enjoying it. We've succeeded in what they're doing. It doesn't matter whether they're just doing circuit training once a week because they love it down at the leisure centre, or whether they're off playing for the England rugby team or whatever. That's a success in our book, and it can sometimes be lost. And again, separate conversation, but it's stimulated the importance of GCSEs. Are GCSEs relevant? At year 11, why are we not teaching more sort of soft skills rather than trying to throw papers under their nose so they can recite the date of the Battle of Hastings? I've never need to know it. No, I don't know it. I'm a PE teacher, so I don't know much. But it often gets lost within education, and if anything, this has given pupils an insight in quite extreme. In quite an extreme way, but it's given them an insight into life isn't perfect, and getting a grade doesn't mean you're going to succeed. And likewise, if you can get a grade, it might take you on to the next stage. If you're particularly academic, it is important. Everything's important, but it's highlighting that it shouldn't be skewed directly towards whether you've got a grade 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, whatever. I think it's really stimulated that debate within education, which is great. And it's again just another thing that has forced the discussion.
Sure, Phil. I mean, I think what an amazing note to kind of start to wrap this up on for today, because to me that's really, really powerful. And actually, you know, a friend of ours who was on this podcast a few weeks ago, Kath Bishop, who is an ex-Olympian, you know, and she wrote the book The Long Win. And actually, that's what that's saying is, hey, look, right, our result is not measured by our grade; it's measured by our performance. You know, and that's you're now the second or third person we've had saying, hey, you should be looking at this, because actually, drive anybody to achieve the best performance that they can. If that performance happens to make be world champion, brilliant. If that performance happens to lead you on a fantastic Wednesday afternoon with your mates down the gym, then brilliant. But it's the performance we should be looking to drive rather than focusing on some sort of spurious results. So, guys, I've actually really enjoyed that, and I think that's some great messages in there to send out. And Phil, please keep up the good work. It was super inspirational to come and talk to you and the kids, and we'll definitely come back and see you all, because if nothing else, it gave me a boost, to be honest with you. So yeah, really, really good work. See you soon, guys.
Brilliant. Thank you.